Good afternoon. Welcome to the President's Live Briefing. We have about 242 people registered for this afternoon's session. I ask that you do not raise your hands in the participants tab. Instead, please type your question in the Q&A function so that President Lemons can address your question. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Lemons.
Thank you, Yoshanda. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for the President's Live Briefing. Yesterday afternoon, we launched the Bronx Recovery Corps. That is a new program, very exciting program that we have over 40 students enrolled in for the beginning cohort. It is a really interesting new program that at the launch we had about 70 show up, including Bronx Borough President and also Lehman alumnus Ruben Diaz Jr. The Corps is for Lehman students, and they will be deployed across the Bronx to small businesses and nonprofits. And it's a unique program that is set to, in a way, it's designed after a couple of models that go back some time. One of them is the Depression Area Citizens Conservation Corps, which was a New Deal program that put young unemployed Americans to work on conservation projects. And our version, the Bronx Recovery Corps, will match Lehman students with Bronx employers and community organizations. The funding for these students doesn't come from the employers, but this time around is coming from a generous grant from Deutsche Bank, America's Foundation, and also students will be, as a part of this, receiving, if they're eligible, federal work-study program funding. So we have a variety of ways that we're funding it. It's the work that's been the result of the work from a number of really key people at the college, including Provost Mosu, Associate Provost Brown, Vice President Ebersol, Professor Teresita Levy, Amanda Dubois-Moake, and a number of others who have spent a lot of time developing this program, along with our partner, Here to Here, which is an organization in the Bronx. There's going to be a town hall broadcast with the 5 candidates for City Council District 11's vacant seat that will be hosted by BronxNet and the Riverdale Press. That's going to air next Tuesday, February 2nd at 7 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67, FiOS Channel 2133, and also online at bronxnet.tv, as well as Facebook Live. This has been recorded already, this session. In the second portion of the town hall, our very able students do a great job questioning the 5 candidates. This position is open because Councilmember Andrew Cohen, who I think many of you know about, left his seat to become justice in the Bronx Supreme Court. So that's a great loss for the college because Councilmember Cohen has been a huge friend of Lehman College and has helped us over recent years garner major support for some capital projects on campus. But I think that it's great that we hosted the town hall and our students participated. That's a good way for us to begin to build connections to whomever will be the next city council member from District 11. Spring term classes begin tomorrow, so welcome to a new term. Like the fall, it's going to be mostly online. We will have some classes again taking place on campus. As the vaccinations become more numerous, we may see some changes in what's happening on campus this spring, but it's really too early yet to predict what that might be. Last week, President Biden called on colleges to increase vaccine awareness and reduce hesitancy and ensure that students, faculty, and staff know when they're eligible to get the vaccine and where to get it. We plan to do that. Our now very famous alumna, Sandra Lindsay, has agreed to be at the forefront of our efforts to raise participation in vaccination at the college. And so you'll be seeing more about that. You may have noticed if you picked up a print version of the Times today that the top of the fold story is that almost all US counties are considered extremely to very dangerous for coronavirus infection. So even though we're hearing and we're seeing that the actual numbers seem to be declining, this is kind of the post-holiday decline. That doesn't mean that the conditions are better. In fact, conditions appear to be getting worse in terms of the likelihood of being infected. And my way of thinking about this is you have to, because this virus is invisible, right? We never know where we're encountering it. We never will know most of the time if we do encounter it. But you really have to kind of think about this invisible cloud that you're walking through. You are encountering it. And the more people you're around, the more you are encountering it. And so you just have to continue to act that way. We all do. Numbers are down, but the risk is not down at all. And it's going to remain pretty high through the winter and into the spring, and then we don't know. Of course, as spring is about on us, believe it or not, even though I know we're going into a really cold number of days here, we're planning for the summer and the fall terms. And you saw the chancellor indicated that we will be back on campus in the fall. And no doubt we will be in some way. However, in light of what I've just said about the risk of infection continuing, coming back will not be like coming back in the fall of 2019. It will be different. It will not be like the fall of 2020 either, probably somewhere in between there. We're still going to need to maintain all of the safety measures that we've been having to keep our campus safe and to keep everyone healthy. And by the way, although we have had, certainly have had some incidents, cases of individuals who have been on campus who then were positive, we haven't had any significant transmission that's traced to our campus over these 10 or 11 months now, which I think says a lot about how effective what we've done so far has been. But masks will continue to be required indoors, and no noses hanging out over the edge, please. We will still be doing the Everbridge screening. We will be taking all the precautions, distancing and cleaning. And occupancy in the fall in classrooms will be below the pre-COVID numbers that we would have had. That will vary between the kinds of rooms that we're in, but we'll achieve that through a variety of ways: hybrid course formats, alternative scheduling of classes, and the work that's done in offices. We're busy doing that now. The deans and the chairs are working on that. It's very complicated. It's tough. It's really challenging. But we know that we cannot count on having classrooms full to their regular occupancy in the fall. It just wouldn't be realistic. It wouldn't be safe from everything that we know now. Things get markedly better if the vaccine gets distributed much more quickly than we're seeing now, and it's more effective. That could change for the better. That would be terrific. If it does, it won't be very hard for us to adjust back to more in person. But what it will mean is that even though our occupancy at any given time will be down, faculty and staff will be coming to campus, and that will be the expectation. It's pretty likely that we will not be requiring students to provide a proof of vaccination when they come. Remember, all of the vaccines that are being used are approved on emergency basis. They don't have full approval, and I think there will be a lot of reluctance to mandate vaccination. However, let me just come back to something I said at the last briefing, which is there is no question that everybody should be vaccinated unless they have a very specific reason, health reason not to. But everyone else should be vaccinated as soon as they possibly can. We are in the early stages of using these vaccines. Even so, the risks of a rare vaccine complication are so much lower than the risks that you encounter if you contact the coronavirus. There's really no rational reason to hesitate to get vaccinated. You should do it. I've done it. So I can tell you that I got a sore arm and that was about it. But you really should do it the moment that the vaccine is available to you. I realize it's not available to everybody yet, and it's going to take some time, but it really is important to do it. Nonetheless, I think it's unlikely we'll mandate it. And so we will have to assume that there will be individuals on campus in the fall that are not vaccinated. And I think that there will be a risk. And that's why we will take all those precautions that I just described. I've asked Vice President Rotolo to work with the cabinet and others to develop further plans beyond what we already have that are on our website, anticipating the fall class schedules and getting us prepared to go into the summer, into the fall, again, with the high priority of keeping everybody safe. Now to switch topics, budget. The governor unveiled the FY22 executive budget last week. That's the starting of the budget process, which will end in about 4 months from now, 3 months, I guess. There's supposed to be a new budget on April 1. The state is now projecting a budget shortfall of about $5 billion for this current fiscal year and about $10 billion for the next fiscal year. There was a surplus going into this year, and that's helping. That's why the shortfall is less this year than next. That surplus will be gone next year, so it won't help. In the funding proposal that the governor has put forward to the legislature, our budgets are restored back to everything that was approved last April minus 5%. So remember, we were working with a 20% reduction. Now it's at 5%, and that seems to be, given that we're in the third quarter already, that seems to be a more reliable estimate of where we're going to land. That's better than we had imagined. That means that for us, if that holds, we will be able to carry more of our fund balance into the next fiscal year when we know we will have some major challenges with our budget. There's a big caveat there, and I can't really say that with just a huge amount of certainty, because the caveat is that we don't know what our revenues will be yet for this year, because revenue collections are way down from what they usually are, and we don't know what those will come back up to. The other things about the budget that the governor rolled out is a $15 per month cap on broadband access, which would be a huge help in the Bronx, where there is such limited access to broadband, as long as the infrastructure is there to actually provide that access. But it certainly would help on the cost side. The fiscal year 22 budget for CUNY, as I said, looks like it will continue a 5% reduction from what it was last April. So it would pretty much be flat after the 5% reduction this year is taken into account. The TAP program would be funded, actually would be increased a bit. Student eligibility for TAP could be maintained even if a student would have lost TAP due to circumstances around not being able to complete classes. Normally, that 12 credit requirement has to be met, but that will be relaxed for the next year, which will help a lot of our students. They'll still be eligible for TAP. The proposed budget fully funds the opportunity programs, including SEEK. And it also, by the way, reimburses us for amounts that were withheld so far in the current fiscal year. Another thing that it does is it extends the predictable funding plan. That is the plan that allows SUNY and CUNY to raise tuition each year up to a limit of $200. And that doesn't mean that those universities will do that, but it gives them the option to do that. So those are the big items in the budget that was rolled out. Of course, we're now going to have a real process about it, and the legislature will weigh in. This time there's a supermajority in the Senate, So that does leave the possibility the legislature could overrule the governor on budget this year. Doesn't seem very likely that would happen, but it will be a little bit different budget dynamic probably this year because of that. The CARES Act funding that was allocated in April has not still been allocated to the colleges outside of some special amounts. The amount that was given to us for increasing mental health resources and some other funding, but most of the CARES Act funding that was meant to go to the colleges in CUNY has not yet been released. And the reason is because it was held back because the state budget hadn't been settled for this fiscal year for CUNY. We're getting very close to that, so we may be getting within a few weeks to knowing how those remaining CARES Act funds will be allocated to the campuses. Right now, we really don't know. The new stimulus bill, which actually allocates significantly more funding to CUNY than the CARES Act, if you've looked, you may have noticed that the allocations to the different CUNY campuses was published by the U.S. Department of Education. Lehman College has nominally been allocated $26 million, but remember that what happened with the CARES Act is the central administration actually administered all of that money. So it didn't directly come to us, and actually was coming to us only previously for the CARES Act in the form of reimbursement after we submitted expenses. We don't know how that will go with the new stimulus bill. We do know that it will again require the governor to approve CUNY's plan for using those funds. Those funds will also likely be expendable well into 2022. So they're not likely to be all released and spent in this and the coming fiscal year. But I think it's just an important thing to remember, because it's very exciting to see that 25 million, but you have to remember that the governor also sees that number. And in allocating CUNY's budget is very likely to take that number into account in juggling all of the other needs around the state. So it's nice to see, but I think we shouldn't get too excited about it covering all of our costs related to the pandemic, because it's very unlikely to do that. It will, however, be more flexible in the way that we use it. We do know that. And one of the good things about that is we should be able to use some of those funds to replace lost revenue, lost tuition revenue due to enrollment declines. And if that is the case, and I think it is, what that does is allows us to use some of those funds then to offer courses that we need to offer, even if our state budget is lower than we need it to be. That would be a big help. That helps students, obviously, to get courses they need, but it also helps us to retain faculty, part-time faculty. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to use it. I just don't know how available those funds are going to be. I don't think they're going to really have an impact on the spring term, which begins tomorrow, but they will definitely have an impact on what we're able to do in the fall term. So that brings me to the topic of our part-time faculty. And no, that's been a big concern all across CUNY. There's been a lot written about it, and a lot of, I think, concern all across the university about the hiring of part-time faculty. And some other campuses have been highlighted for greatly reducing, not reappointing part-time faculty members. We're attempting to take the same approach at Lehman College for the spring term that we did in the fall, and that's what we've really attempted to do. We've really tried to sustain our enrollment so that we could offer the classes. And of course, if we offer classes, that means we need faculty to teach those classes, and that the variable is how many part-time faculty members are needed. So what we've done is try very hard to sustain our enrollment and thereby offer courses. We haven't always been able to do that, but I think we've done pretty well. One of the things that we have paid attention to, again, as we've done course planning for this coming spring term, is we've tried to be sure that faculty, part-time faculty members who would lose health insurance if they did not have employment at Lehman College would be retained, and we've worked very hard to do that. I think we have succeeded at doing that again. I think that's been an important goal. I think that everybody has felt that would be the best thing that we could do, and that's what we're trying very hard to do. And I think we will succeed at doing that. So it doesn't mean that every part-time faculty member has been reappointed, but it does mean that those who are needing that employment to retain their health insurance have been. Finally, I want to turn to campus climate and diversity and the task force report that I received at the end of December, and give you a little update on where we are in that. That report focused on a number of areas. It was a very broad-based report, and again, I want to thank all the members of that task force who did a really good job, and I put a lot of time and effort into it over the past couple of months, and did a thorough job of looking at the whole campus. One of the areas that they focused on in the report is the curriculum and the need for more comprehensive curriculum revisions and updates that look at the curriculum through the lens of diversity and inclusion. And I've mentioned before the work that the English department has done in looking at their entire curriculum, and really in a very quick way, particularly given how long these things usually take in academia, have very quickly taken on the task of looking at their curriculum and made major revisions. I know that speech and hearing sciences are doing the same thing. And this is something that the report points out needs to happen across the college. Sort of a decolonializing of the curriculum and diversifying the curriculum in a way that really works for our students. They're also recommending that this lens be a part of regular curriculum reviews, and that we also do curriculum reviews across the board as soon as we can. Also suggests that we may need to think about how we support that effort across the campus, and whether we need personnel to assist our Vice President for Diversity and Human Resources. Just how we would do that, we don't know, but that was one of the recommendations that we'll have to be looking at. The report also calls for more diversity and inclusion training. That's something that we're already doing, but something they suggest that we look at and do more of, particularly for departments and other areas of the college. It also calls for better dissemination of diversity, hiring and retention resources. And again, that is something that we are doing, but we always can look at that and try to do more of that, do it more effectively. Calls for consolidation of information on diversity and inclusion on our website. So that's something, again, that we will look at how we can do that. We're in the process actually of trying to do a major revision of the entire college website, which is a very big project. And this would be something that would be part of that. And then finally, it calls out for developing a more nuanced way of reporting incidents. We have a system of reporting incidents, major incidents of harassment, and other kinds of concerns like that. But those tend to be major kinds of incidents that get reported. And there are so many things, microaggressions and things that can happen on campus, that can happen in classrooms, where we don't really have a good way to be aware of those things, to understand the extent to which they're taking place, so that we really can address them. And so that is something we'll be looking at. How can we develop a way for students and staff and faculty, really anyone on campus, to have an easy way to report things that really need to be noticed. So what's happened since the report? I've reviewed this with the cabinet and the president's advisory board, tried to identify the near-term things that we can do. One of the near-term things that we are already in the process of doing is identifying external resources, consultants to conduct a more thorough college-wide campus climate survey that hopefully we can do this spring, where we can fill in a really thorough way what really is the climate on campus at this moment. And that will help us identify then further things that we want to do. We think we will try to have a special campus-wide session all day or an afternoon or morning session this spring that focuses on this. And fortunately, we will be able to use some of the Mackenzie Scott gift to support these early activities and activities then that will also take place later on. And of course, we're very close to completing a new strategic plan for the next 5 years. And one of the things that we want to do, as recommended in the report, is to be sure that these goals around diversity and inclusion are very clearly incorporated into the strategic plan. I'll be sending a synopsis of this report to the campus soon, working on it right now, so you'll be able to read for yourself what is in the report. So with that, I end my kind of formal reporting that I wanted to do for you. And now I'm going to turn to the questions that you have. There was one question that came in, and it goes back to what I've already touched on. And that is to do with vaccination. And the question was about, are we going to require students to show vaccination as we do for some things now and as the public schools do? And hopefully I've answered that question already, as I can't tell you that we will do that. What I can tell you is I think it's unlikely that we will do that. I think that, that probably what will happen is that we will do what I've already mentioned, is we're going to very strongly recommend and encourage everyone to be vaccinated. And we will take all the measures that we can take to be safe, really not assuming that everyone is vaccinated, and also not assuming that even if everyone is vaccinated, they can't spread the virus. Because I think one thing you probably are aware of is that all we know for sure about these vaccines that we're using is that they seem to be very effective at preventing people from getting sick. We do not know if they prevent people from being infected, which is a different thing, and if they prevent people from spreading the virus to others. So we have to assume right now, without lacking any other data, that it is possible, even after you're vaccinated, to infect someone else. That's why I'm going to still be wearing a mask. Really not so worried about protecting myself at this point, but I don't want to risk other people. So that's how masks have been all from the beginning, right? I mean, masks have been really much more about caring about those around us and not wanting to endanger them, although they do protect the wearer as well. So now I'm going to turn to the questions that are coming in and start to answer those. So I think the first question I probably have touched on, it's about CARES Act funding for state relief and how that might impact us. And you know, the other way, I didn't really mention this, but if you're paying attention to what's happening in Washington, you know that there's a major debate that now is going to happen around what will happen with the next stimulus package. And the Democrats and the Biden administration are pushing very hard for aid to states and municipalities, which would really help a great deal. New York State did its budget based on getting at least $6 billion in the next stimulus package, but really wants $15 billion. That would be ideal to not have to make any cuts in the budget. So, but we don't know if that's going to happen. And so that's going to remain just a big variable for us in our own budget situation, particularly going into the next fiscal year. So another question, would like to know, would the financial aid office have Zoom meetings to communicate with students? I know that there has continued to be concern about communication and having rapid enough communication. And that's a really great question that, that we could look into, because I think what we're trying to do is continue to find ways that we can take care of students in this remote environment that we're in. We're going to still need to do that really through this spring term, probably into the summer, and to some degree in the fall. So that's a good suggestion, and we'll be happy for other suggestions too, to try to make this work as well as we can for students, and that's obviously a critical one. So there's a concern about students registering. This is the last day before the term begins, and being in contact with advisors. And I think that, again, this probably has some to do with the remote environment that we're in. I don't know the specifics about what the lag time has been for students who need advising in order to register. But what I do know is that we've really been all hands on deck, because enrollment is such a big concern, and we want to make sure that every student that wants to be enrolled is able to. Is the summer semester planned to be in person or remote? Right now, the plan is that we will be remote for the summer. We're not really, that could change, but I don't really think it will. And I think if you're watching the predictions around the rate of vaccination, which is probably it's the key variable really that we're working with. You know that we don't know where we're going to be by June or July, but we're unlikely to be at a place where we can say that 80–90% of everyone's vaccinated or has had a chance to be. So no, our planning will be for the same kind of summer session that we had last year. And we really only at this point are planning for a change in that in the fall, when we, as I said, we do plan to be more in person. One of the things that could happen, and it's not something that we can say for certain at this point, but we will be looking at, is whether we can begin to offer some services on campus that we have not been able to do, whether we can open up some study areas, computer areas. I know that would be very helpful to students if we could do that to some degree. We'll be looking at that, because the degree to which we can do that safely, we need to do it, because we know that anything like that is very helpful to our students. And it gives them access to computer resources that for some, even though we have a lot of loaner laptops and we have a lot of Wi-Fi hotspots out there, still are struggling with having adequate broadband access. So that's the one variable that I see as we head for the summer sessions. So I'm waiting for some other questions to come in. There are about 180 of us in the session, which is terrific. I'm very happy to have all of you here. So here's a great question. A lot of faculty, especially in Carmen, have shared offices, and there's concern about coming back to campus with a shared office. And that's definitely one of the aspects of coming back to campus in some form or other that we're really looking at. And it's part of the reason, in addition to classrooms, that I have said, since we began to really think and work seriously in the fall term, is let's think about 50%. 50% is not the occupancy that we will have in every office and every classroom, but it's a target. It's sort of an average target that we could think about, and think about not having above 50% occupancy in any of our spaces. Some of our spaces can handle very safely much higher than 50% occupancy, because they have the kind of airflow, fresh air available, and so on, that can do that. And we feel confident we'll be safe as long as people are wearing masks and taking other precautions. But there are spaces where we know we don't want to go above 50%, and that would be many. So this office situation would be a situation like that, where in a shared office, I would not want us to plan to have more than one person in that office at a time. I think that would be the safest way. And we have to think about if different individuals are going in and out of an office on different days, what do we need to do about cleaning? I think that would be an important concern as well, at least for kind of the major surfaces that someone would be in contact: a desk surface, a chair, a computer keyboard, doorknobs, and all of those things that we commonly touch. So we have to work that out, and we will work it out in a way that we're very clear about what the protocols are and what the logistics are around using those space. Also a question in Carmen: a lot of administrators who advise students have small offices without windows or proper air circulation. Again, those are the challenging situations that we have to address, and we will be addressing, because we have to be sure that wherever we have in-person interactions taking place, whether it's in a classroom or an office, that we're doing that in a way that we are really confident will be safe. And so that means that we can't have individuals for any period of time in smaller spaces unless we can be sure that there's a adequate airflow. We'll be looking at every one of those. One thing I feel very confident about is our track record so far at Lehman College, and the integrity and the diligence of our facilities group at the college. They do a really good job. They are really committed to being thorough in cleaning spaces, and I know they will continue to do that. So the principal thing we have to do right now is develop the plan for how that will happen. So question: even if the campus is open in the fall, do we have the option of resuming online classes or continuing some? Yes, we do. We have the option of having some classes continue to be online. There are some limitations to that we're planning on. We think we will have. There is a limitation. You remember that we had waivers from the U.S. Department of Education, New York State Department of Education, and Middle States to offer more than half of our courses online in the spring and again this last fall. We waited actually for a while to get that permission for the fall. If you recall, we weren't sure what would happen. Eventually we got it. Now, it's unlikely we're going to get that same kind of waiver for the coming fall. So what we will need to do is we will need to be sure that we don't have more than 50% of the courses in any program online. In order to do that, we would actually have to have formal approvals from New York State Department of Education and from Middle States to do that. And so if we haven't asked for approval for those programs, we cannot offer over 50% of any given program online. However, hybrid courses don't count as fully online. And so hybrid courses can be offered still and not put us over that 50%. So I think that's going to be a really good alternative for offering courses in the fall. And we can continue to offer courses online that we have done this coming fall, that we have done this fall, and we will do this spring, as long as they don't put a program over 50% of total classes. So there's been a lot of discussion and thought going into how we're planning for the fall, given what we're facing, and it's not easy. And I know that the deans and the chairs are working very hard to figure out how to do this, because there are logistics, there are scheduling issues, the bell schedule we have to figure out, because even if we have a corridor of classrooms, say in Carmen, that has classes going on in every room, those classes may be fine in terms of the density of the number of students in there, the occupancy, but if they all empty into the hallway according to the bell schedule at the same time, that could create conditions in the hallway that would be unsafe. So there are lots of things we have to think about in terms of the timing of classes, whether we stagger them in some way. All of these things are, we haven't really faced them before, and it actually makes planning for the fall term more complicated than what we have had to do for this past fall term, or what happened in the spring term. Also a comment about question, with 50% occupancy, will the campus presence be screened as it is now? And the answer to that at this point is yes. We would still do the Everbridge screening. And so people coming on campus would still present that, that clearance to come on campus. Again, that could change. But I think that right now, that the plan is not to change that. Bathrooms in Carmen for staff and students have always been an issue with hot water, lines of students. That's another really important logistical issue that we have to solve. And again, we will be using those restrooms, but at the same time, we have to work out a way to do that so that the occupancy is no more than what it should be. And there always will be challenges there in terms of cleaning. So again, it's something we're very aware of. And Vice President Rotolo and her team will be coming up with a plan for how we can do that. Will the college be able to have classes that can have in-person and broadcast on Zoom at the same time so students can attend live from off the campus? That's a really great question, and that is something that we've been talking about as one way that we could deliver classes. You can envision the class that half the students come in one day a week, the other half come in another day a week, but those sessions are also synchronously on Zoom so that everybody can be in the class at the same time, half present, half not. That's one of the solutions that we really want to be looking at. We don't, right now I can't tell you for sure what the Zoom situation will be. We have licenses for everybody for this academic year, for the fall and for the spring, and we'll see. But we really will need some kind of capability like that, I think, if we're going to be able to manage with a 50% occupancy idea. And by the way, you're going to probably continue to hear from the Chancellor and others in the central administration that we will be 100% on campus. And to some degree, I guess we can make that statement, but that doesn't mean that we're going to have 100% in person, as I've been describing, the way that we would have done that before the pandemic. But since a hybrid course, for instance, in a way counts as 100% on-campus course, even though half the time or more students are not present on campus, we probably can get to 100% or very close to it, and yet still have, in reality, only 50% occupancy in many of our spaces. So I'm sorry if that sounds like the kind of word spin that we've all grown too accustomed to, but it's some ways it's a matter of kind of how we're defining 100% and the way that really plays out in reality. But again, I have to keep emphasizing that we're going to do this in a way that is safe. That's topmost. Here's a question: Can Microsoft Teams be used that way? You know, that's really, I'm probably going to get onto sort of dangerous territory if I give you an answer to that question. But my experience with Microsoft Teams, which is what we use for all of our administrative work, and so we do all our sessions on Teams, we don't use Zoom. I would say, yes, you probably can do that. But I think, you know, there's a more sophisticated answer to that question that we can get, and you will be hearing more from IT and also from our online office as we get closer to really planning for these courses in the fall. So computer center or library on campus that both have students and staff faculty at the same time, what would that look like? 25% students and 25 staff and 25% staff and faculty. That's a great question. I don't know what that mix would look like. And I suspect that that would really vary a lot depending on what area we were talking about. A lot of areas in the library, my observation is it's mostly students, but of course we do have faculty and staff also there. And again, I think however that gets managed, the key number is really what's the percent occupancy that we think is safe and how that occupancy is carried out. In other words, what the distancing is like and what the cleaning schedules are and so on. That's really going to be the key number. And I think that will probably vary a lot depending on which area of the library or other areas we're talking about. And it probably will vary from day to day or maybe from hour to hour, depending on what kinds of activities are going on. There's going to be a lot of variability. But again, I think what we want to do is we're going to have to set our upper limits, know where the safety limit is, and make sure that we're staying within it. Will we be having a credit, no credit option for this semester that we're beginning tomorrow? What we've been told by the central administration is that there will not be an option for the spring term. As we've seen, sometimes these things change as we move into the term. But right now, I think the assumption that we all need to make is that that will not be an option for the coming term. One of the challenges is as we add additional terms where there is this credit, no credit option available, that students could be accumulating quite a large number of courses that are credit, no credit on their transcript. And that begins to be a real burden for students when they do that. It makes it much more difficult as they're progressing through programs and also as they're looking at their postgraduate pathway, whether it's for another graduate program or professional school and so on. So it gets to be much riskier if we continue to do this. So right now, and that, I'm sure that's the main reason why the central administration has determined that that's not going to be an option for this term that we're just beginning. So there are some really specific questions that are coming in that that I really can't answer for you, but we do have a record of all these questions, and we will get answers to them so that if they're not addressed, if I don't address them, we will address them. So I'm going to pause for a minute, waiting for see if there are any other questions that you'd like to have addressed. Well, apparently we've exhausted everyone. So, oh, okay. That triggered a few more questions. So this is a question actually that I've been expecting to hear, and this is the first time that I've seen it. But I know it's going to be coming up now as we enter the spring term. What about graduation? Are we going to have an in-person graduation? I think I can say pretty definitively that unfortunately we will not. We are not going to be at the place where we can do something in person, at least something that's in person like we've been used to doing in former years. Maybe we'll find some way that we can safely do some aspect of that. We haven't actually had that discussion yet, but I think that what we will really be counting on is that we're going to once again have a virtual commencement. I think although it was disappointing last May that we couldn't have a graduation in person, we had a really good virtual graduation. I think that it worked well, and that's what we'll be planning again. I think it will be even better because we've had a year of experience doing it, and that's what we will plan to do. So that is such an important event, and in fact, it's the most important event that we have on campus all year. It's such a hallmark. It's such a point of accomplishment for students who graduate and for their families. And so we want to make a really big deal out of that. And so we're already starting to plan, and barring something really miraculous, we're going to proceed with planning for a virtual graduation. So seeing no other questions coming in, we're getting close to the end of the hour. I think we'll call this session to a close. Thank you again. It's great to have everyone here. And again, all the best moving into this spring term of 2021. Stay safe, please.